Patrick James Benway was born on July 23, 1943. Not much is known about Patrick's early life, but at the time of our story, he was 81 years old and living in a group home in Bartow, Florida. According to his friend and fellow group home resident Janice Pepin, we had such wonderful conversations together. I really got to know the man. He was a very gentle, quiet, loving man. Having moved into the home just 1 week prior to the events of today's story and 10 days after the death of her husband, she said that Patrick made her feel welcome and also shared that, "I just thank God that I got to know him, even if it was only 1 week." Janice and Patrick lived in a small single-story home located at 2226 Bluebird Avenue in Bartow along with two other roommates. One of those roommates was an 18-year-old young man named Moses Ojeda who had just moved in the day prior. He'd recently been released from a mental health facility after he assaulted his mother and had been Baker-acted 6 different times in the past. According to Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, his mother was protective of him and she wanted to get him help, and she really meant well and went above and beyond to help him.
But what is the Baker Act? According to the Florida Department of Children and Families, the Florida Mental Health Act focuses on crisis services for individuals with mental illness, much like an emergency department is for individuals experiencing a medical emergency. It is commonly called the Baker Act after former Florida State Representative Maxine Baker, who sponsored it. An individual may be taken to a receiving facility for involuntary examination under the Baker Act if there is reason to believe he or she has a mental illness, and due to the mental illness, the individual has refused or is unable to determine if examination is necessary, and either, without care or treatment, the individual is unlikely to care for themselves, which can result in substantial harm to their well-being, and it is not evident that harm can be avoided through familial intervention or other services, or it is likely based on recent behavior that without treatment, the individual will pose a serious threat to themselves or others.
At around 6:45 on Saturday, May 17, 2025, Moses' mother dropped him off at the group home. Just 5 hours later, he did the unthinkable.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with me. I have also with me today Captain Bill Stevens from the Bartow Police Department. And let me recap what we went over yesterday afternoon, and then I will give you the update today. We are working with the Bartow Police Department on this murder investigation. Bartow Police Department got a 911 call Sunday afternoon, and they arrived about 1 o'clock and it wasn't to a murder, but it was to a person that was injured and needed help. When they went in, they immediately noticed that this person had died a violent death. The victim was 81 years of age, and he was obviously deceased. And as they were taking off his shirt to do immediate care, it was obvious to the police officers on the scene that this guy had been stabbed, and he had been stabbed to death. He died a violent death. This was on Bluebird Avenue. He was staying in a group home, and it's ET Home Care, and the owner is Adrena Thornton. It's an independent living care facility. Our victim was in bed asleep when this occurred. Our suspect is Moses Ojeda. He's 18 years of age. And here's what we know. In 2025, he's been Baker-acted 6 different times. And on this occasion, he was sent, once he was released from the Baker Act, and he was in the Baker Act facility about 2 weeks, he was sent to this care facility. Now, I want you to understand that this is independent living, so there's no direct supervision of this person.
It really makes you wonder, if someone was Baker-acted 6 different times, why would they be released to an independent care facility with no supervision? The last time Moses was picked up was somewhat recent. Did they really think he'd magically get better once he turned 18?
So he arrived there at about 6:45 in the evening. At about 11:45 in the evening, or about 5 hours later, he stabbed our victim to death. He stabbed our victim 113 times. And when we asked him during the interview, he confessed why he stabbed him 113 times. He said the knife wasn't very sharp. We saw there were 4 or 5 deep wounds, and then, as you can imagine, just dozens and dozens of wounds that weren't so deep. We also noticed that our victim had defensive wounds on him. So during the confession, we said, Moses, why did you stab this victim? He said, well, voices in my head told me to kill him. And so you stabbed him. What was he doing at the time? Oh, he was sleeping, but he woke up. And when he woke up, our victim said, why do you want to stab me? And he said, I just do. When we ask our suspect, Moses, do you regret stabbing the victim? He said, I live my life with no regrets. So let me focus on this a minute. When he was dropped off at this facility by his mother told the people who owned the care facility, you've got to hide the knives. And they did. They put the knives in an undisclosed location, but Moses found them.
We'll never know what the exact conversation was between the mother and the workers at the care facility, but instead of hiding the knives, it sounds like they should have been locked up. Or maybe this wasn't an appropriate facility for Moses, period.
And within 5 hours of arriving at the facility, stabbed and killed our 81-year-old victim. Now, here's what's important to understand. That upon further questioning, Moses said, oh, our victim was a good guy. He said, I just had to do what I had to do. We asked, did he fight with you? Did you have an argument during the evening before the suspect or the victim went to sleep? And he said, no, not at all. I just heard voices that told me to kill him. So he stabbed him ultimately 113 times. Moses has been diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, paranoid schizophrenic, autism, anxiety, and sudden outburst of rage. And guess what? He doesn't have any criminal history. Now, he was Baker Acted 6 times this year, and he has committed what appears to be domestic battery violence against his mother. But his mother was protective of him, and she wanted to get him help. And she really meant well and went above and beyond to help him. But at the end of the night, he was violent, and he was dangerous, and he murdered this person. Okay, so what happened after the murder? Well, Moses said that he went to the victim's bathroom, where he washed the knife and cleaned it up, where he washed the blood off of himself. He then replaced the knife in the butcher block, where it was originally placed out of sight. Then he went to his room and he took off a cover that he was wearing. I believe it was like a hoodie that had blood on it, and put it in his hamper. And then he changed his shoes, which had blood on them, and they were still in his room. Then he woke up the next morning. He turned off the light and closed the victim's door, because that's normally how the victim was. Now understand that the victim normally didn't eat breakfast, so they didn't become concerned about him until lunchtime. And that's when they found him. Well, in fact, he'd been dead about 12 hours by that time. So our suspect wakes up the next morning after a good night's sleep, after stabbing our victim to death. He eats breakfast, he watches a little television, he hangs out, and he is still there when 911 is dialed and the Bartow police officers arrive and detain everyone. In fact, the owners of this facility, this care facility, said that during the evening, apparently Moses was wandering around in the neighborhood and went to go back into the house but forgot the door code. So they let him back into the home. And they had made up their mind from their interaction just through the evening and the next morning that, hey, we're going to have to take him back to his mother, that he needs far more attention than we can give him in this independent living facility.
Next, Sheriff Judd addresses the elephant in the room. Was Moses violent? Well, after stabbing poor Patrick 113 times, I think it's safe to assume that he might be.
So I want to leave you with this picture. This is the murder weapon. As you see, the tip of the knife is broken off. We're still looking for the tip of the knife. We don't know if it was broken off before, but that was one of the reasons he said he had a hard time stabbing him, because the knife wasn't very sharp. But was he violent? Yes. Was he dangerous? Yes.
I'm glad you agree. Next, we learn a little bit more about Patrick. Not that Sheriff Judd wanted to name him, and a little bit more about the group home. I know I had questions about this. How did a violent 18-year-old end up in a facility with senior citizens?
And ultimately, he murdered an 81-year-old man who was simply sleeping in his bed. Okay. Any questions?
What do we know about Patrick? Was he a father, or how long was he with the group home, or anything like that?
Who was Patrick?
The 81-year-old?
Well, I'm not releasing the name of the victim because he is a victim. So, but we know that the victim's been there for a period of months.
Can you speak to what this home is for? Like, how do people get there? Why was this man dropped off there?
Sure, people are referred there, and understand this is independent living, okay? Now I'm told they have 4 homes in this neighborhood, and this is an upscale, beautiful neighborhood in Bartow. And some of them are assisted living, but in this, they're independent living. But apparently, they need a place to stay, and they need a group setting or need someone that can help them. They're all independent folks. They're not married. They don't have an immediate family there, so they kind of depend on each other, and they clean and wash, and they are if you will, a family of sorts. One of the 4 was not there. He had left to be with his family for the weekend. There was a senior lady there who obviously had nothing to do with it and was not aware that anything occurred. And then there was our victim, and then there was Moses, our suspect.
Sheriff, did the owner of the facility, do they know his background before he entered and they gave him shelter there?
I'm not sure if they knew his background. I can't help but think if they did know it, that they would not have accepted him, because they were able to determine between that evening and the next morning, not knowing that he had stabbed one of the residents overnight, that he needed more care than they were capable of providing. So they had planned on later on Sunday to call his mother to come get him and to try to put him in a facility that provided more care. But I want you to understand that Moses had clear intent, and he had the wherewithal to go back and try to hide the evidence, put the knife back. The reality is, does he have mental health issues? That's abundantly clear, but his criminal intent was clear.
Do you know if Moses was on any medication or taking them?
I don't know if he was on any medication.
You know why an 18-year-old would be in a setting with older people? It seems like a mismatch.
Yeah. The mother was afraid of him. She actually had him living in a separate Motel 6, if you will. When they would stay at a motel, she would rent him a separate room. She was afraid of him. He had been violent toward her and the family in the past. So she needed some place to put him. They kept him about 2 weeks under a Baker Act, and certainly, as you can well imagine, they gave him medicine at that particular time. Now, there is documentation where he said, and it's captured in our report, that he was not suicidal and not homicidal. Meh, meh, meh. He's homicidal.
Should he have even been sent to that house, Sheriff? The owner of the home says she was reassured by the placement people had his mom that he was fine and doing better. And
well, somebody didn't tell somebody the truth. This young man, 18 years of age, had no business being around other people. He's clearly had problems with sudden outburst of anger. And he admitted to us he never had a conflict, a cross word with this 81-year-old gentleman who was in bed asleep when our suspect, Moses, started stabbing him, and he woke up and asked, why? Why do you want to stab me?
Can you even imagine that? It's almost midnight and you wake up because some kid found kitchen knives and now you're gonna die. So, when asked about all of this, Janice shared with reporters, "That night I didn't sleep well. I kept hearing doors opening, closing, but I didn't get out. I left my door locked and I stayed in the bedroom. The only thing that scares me is the thought that I was alone with him and there was a dead man, my dear friend, on the floor, blood everywhere."
Do you know what goes into a Baker Act case, and is it normal to have that many in just 5 months?
Do you know it's not uncommon when people are having significant mental health issues? Whenever we found out he stayed almost 2 weeks in a facility under the last Baker Act, what that tells us is the mental health providers saw that he had substantial need for help, because normally Baker Acts are in and out, and he stayed there a substantial amount of time. And quite frankly, as we can see now, he needed even more time.
Sheriff, when you say that he was referred there, do you mean that he was referred there by the hospital or the?
He was turned back over to his mother, and his mother, and I'm not sure how she made the contacts, came up with this facility. And this facility this facility ensured that he had a place to stay. But they, I suspect, were under the impression that he could live independently. They certainly had no idea he was violent, or they wouldn't have allowed that to occur. And they figured out, irrespective of ignorance about the murder, that he was much more than they could keep at that facility by the mere fact that he locked himself out of the house and was wandering around in the neighborhood. Now, I can tell you, the neighbors are going to be incensed because of the kind of person that was certainly in the neighborhood with all kinds of children and families. And if you've been to Bluebird Avenue, it is a beautiful, upscale neighborhood.
Now, you said that I can't recall exactly who you said, but someone said to hide the knives. I mean, isn't that a red flag right there?
His mother told them, you have to hide the knives. And we also received information that the mother knew that or told another facility that as well. So he had a history of being violent. He was violent with his mother. And at the end of the day, we saw just how violent he was capable of being. In my estimation, he was a ticking time bomb. And now, guess where he is? Now he's in the jail, and we're having to deal with it.
Could the group home be facing any violations or anything like that?
I have no idea about the regulations. There's different levels of regulations depending on whether this is independent living or assisted living. We heard from one source that the independent living is not under state regulation because they don't supervise the folks. They just provide a living environment for them. But I don't know that for a fact because obviously we don't conduct those investigations allegations. I certainly know that if the appropriate authorities have jurisdiction, that they will do an administrative overview of that. I don't know if there's any state or federal oversight of an independent living facility where people are supposed to be capable of taking care of themselves.
I actually have some extra information about that. In the wake of Patrick's murder, the group home on Bluebird Avenue actually got shut down for operating illegally. Apparently, they weren't even licensed by the state to operate.
This group home on Bluebird Avenue in Bartow, 81-year-old Patrick Benway suffered a violent death, stabbed over 100 times. Polk County deputies say his 19-year-old roommate, Moses Ojeda, confessed to killing him. After the homicide, the city's code compliance discovered the renter of the home, Adrena Thornton, was operating the group home illegally and without a license.
She stated to me that this was kind of an independent living facility where the residents lived as a community versus being cared for like you would be cared for in, an adult care facility.
Thornton admitted the 4 or 5 residents living there would come from hospitals, state agencies, and would be referred by private mental health care entities. She was also charging the residents rent. The actual owner of the house, a real estate investment company based in Texas, had no idea Thornton was using the home illegally and is in the process of evicting her.
It's my understanding, based on my conversation with her, that she did know that he had mental health issues and that he was on medication for mental health, but that she felt at that time that it was not to the extent that it would endanger the other residents staying at that location.
Toll says Ojeda had been referred to Thornton by a mental health organization, and his mother made payment arrangements for him to stay at the house for at least a month.
She was a little unprepared for that statement. However, it at the time wasn't enough really for her to deny him access to the home.
The city's case is currently open and will remain in a pending status until there's evidence the illegal group home is fully closed down.
News channel Tampa Bay 10 actually spoke with Adrena Thornton, the woman running ET Home Care LLC. And this is what she had to say.
Within 3 hours, he hadn't killed the man. By the time I came home, the man was dead already.
And then some mixed vegetables.
The city says Adrena Thornton was operating an unlicensed group home, renting the property, taking in residents with mental health needs, and collecting rent without the proper permits.
Our ordinance requires that anybody who wants to open a group home in Bartow must go through an application process. That application must be reviewed by our Planning and Zoning Board.
Thornton legally operates a licensed adult care home right across the street. She says she opened this second location out of compassion, and it was the first time that she had allowed a young person to stay there, a decision she now deeply regrets.
I felt guilty for putting Patrick and my other residents in that position, with that boy in the house.
Thornton says Ojeda's mother warned them to put away their knives, but described him as calm and autistic. Law enforcement later revealed he had been Baker acted 6 times this year and was hearing voices at the time of the attack.
My mom says she got her antennas went up. She wished she would have acted on them. But she knows me, I give people chances.
Despite the tragedy, Thornton says she plans to open another independent living home within a year. But she's learned the hard way that good intentions aren't always enough.
As far as getting with code enforcement, I'll make sure I do that so that I don't put people in position to be displaced again.
Situations like this always give me pause, or as Adrena put it, make my antennas go up. Normally when folks live in an arrangement like this, there's state funding involved. Without proper oversight from state agencies, this could cross the line into elder mistreatment or a trafficking situation pretty quickly, regardless of good intentions. Anyway, back to Sheriff Judd.
Could the mother be held liable for anything related to this?
Well, when it comes to lawyers, they can sue anybody for anything. But certainly you have to believe that there is some culpability or liability mixed in with all of this. But the largest amount of culpability and liability is with Moses. He knew better than to murder this man. He stealthily sought out the knife. He picked this 81-year-old man who's in bed asleep and helpless. Then he cleaned up the crime scene and replaced the knife so as not to be detected.
Do we know if the suspect and the victim had any interaction earlier that day, being that was his first day?
Yes, the suspect, Moses, said they had no negative interaction. Now, did they have any interaction at all? I don't know, but they had zero negative interaction according to the suspect. In fact, he went so far as to say, yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good person. That's right. Moses said the person he stabbed and killed was a good person, but he was just told, he heard sounds, voices in his head to kill the victim, and that's what he did.
I feel like this man failed to be protected.
Excuse me?
Did anybody fail to protect this victim?
This suspect is 18 years of age and is responsible for his conduct. Obviously, the first thing someone wants to do is point fingers, and usually it's at the government. It is up to this 18-year-old to be responsible for his own conduct. Now, quite frankly, the government's now going to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on this guy, because we're either going to house him forever, we're going to house him for a long time, we're going to hire him defense attorneys. You know, it's a no-brainer that the defense is going to be that of insanity, but I'm telling you, he had clear criminal intent. He acted with malice aforethought. And then he went to the effort to hide the weapon, to clean up after himself. So why? It's indisputable he's got mental health issues. To me, it's not disputable either that he's culpable and responsible for this. So Moses is no longer a juvenile. And his mother, from everything we've seen, and this is still the early part of the investigation, we're just a few, 27, 28 hours into this investigation. His mother seemed to try and try and try. But whose responsibility is that the 81-year-old is dead? There you go, right there.
In the end, Moses was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. He is currently being held in the Polk County Jail without bond. As with all cases that have yet to go to trial, Moses is considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Soon after, local mental health experts began weighing in on the incident. Charles Caniff, president of NAMI Florida and retired law enforcement officer, shared that what happened in Polk County is a tragedy, most certainly. However, we must fight the urge to see all persons with mental health issues as potentially violent. The truth is, the majority of people suffering a mental health condition are not violent and are more likely to be a victim of violence than commit it. We must push back on the stigma associated with mental health and acknowledge that it is okay to not be okay. He continued, the Baker Act is designed to stabilize a person who is in crisis. It is not a treatment for a mental health condition beyond addressing the first 72 hours of a mental health crisis event. Sadly, there is limited funding for mental health and mental wellness, and this is compounded by a lack of clinicians to service those who might struggle with mental health. President and CEO of the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, Clara Reynolds, spoke with reporters from Tampa Bay 10 over Zoom and shared the following.
It's an absolute horrible tragedy. This is a situation that I think just breaks everybody's heart because there's many victims. There may have just been issues in implementing that discharge plan. Maybe there were issues with medication or follow-up with therapy. This is a horrible, horrible, unbelievable event that happened. But because that individual had a mental health condition, it doesn't mean that everybody with a mental health condition, that this is an outcome for them.
Patrick's final arrangements were taken care of by Cremation Services of Polk County. As of the date of this recording in October of 2025, even though the multiple media outlets have released Patrick's name, it's unclear whether or not Patrick's relatives even know what happened to him. Per his obituary, Steele's family funeral services were actively searching for his family members, and we're asking folks to reach out to them at 863-324-1475 with any information. We'll have that number up for you on the screen, as well as the pinned comment and the description. Patrick deserves to be put to rest with dignity and to be known as much more than just a violent death. And most importantly, His family and loved ones deserve to know what happened to him.